guys, welcome to the fifth episode of the Whole Lotta Jesus podcast. I hope y'all are having a great day. I am so excited about this guest. Victoria has been a role model for me, and I know a few of my friends for a while. She wears a lot of hats. She is very inspiring. She is an entrepreneur. She is a seamstress. She is a writer, an author, a journalist, and she is just an amazing person. And I'm so glad that we get to interview her today. She also comes from a big family. She has 8 siblings, which I think is really incredible and probably teaches you a lot of patience and like how to but that family dynamic sounds so fun. So today we're going to interview her, talk about her journey, just get some advice from her on to help you and your journey with the Lord. And so Victoria, how are you today?
I'm good. I'm super excited to be here.
Great. Yes, we are too. Random question. It is cold here in the South. Is it freezing? I know you're from the North. You're from Michigan. Is it like super freezing up there today?
It is pretty cold the last few days. We've had like our intermittent spring where we've gotten a couple of like 70-degree sunny days and we all get really excited. And then like the next day it's back below 30. So today, currently, I've been freezing in the house because it's super windy where I live as well. So it's just like whipping all of the cold air against our house and it's so cold. So yes, it is quite chilly. Big wind chill up here today.
Yeah, yeah. I'm in a sweater and I was thinking before this, I was like, man, I'm sure it's if it's cold down here and we're in Texas, I'm sure it's very cold
It's definitely
and
cold.
up there. Okay, so I always ask this question to every guest. What is the coolest way you have seen God move either in your life or in someone else's?
Hmm. That's such a good question. And I feel like there's so many like little mini testimonies I feel like I could answer. Um, I'm trying to think of like what a good one would be. I guess like for me, the thing that the testimony the Lord's been bringing back to mind, and this one involves me, but it's not necessarily my testimony, is just that like realization that I almost wasn't born. So my mom had 3 boys first. You mentioned we have a big family. She had 3 boys, one after the other, and my parents also were not saved at that point as well. So my mom's like, I was trying to raise 3 boys without Jesus. It didn't go very well. It was just like super crazy and hectic. And she just genuinely didn't want any more kids. She was just like, this is so much. Like, I can barely keep it together. I'm pulling my hair out. Like, I don't want any more kids. And so she just was so set against it. And she'll even say too, she's like, I genuinely cursed my womb. Like it's kind of a miracle that like we had as many kids as we did. And so there was a point where they after that, after my third brother, they ended up getting saved and like met Jesus in a really cool way. And my dad started having the desire to have more kids. And so he just took that to the Lord of like, Lord, please change my wife's heart. Like I really want to have more kids. I just feel like this is what we're supposed to do. And my mom went from like one day, like, I will never have another kid to not being able to wait to get pregnant, like basically overnight. And then she got to have her first daughter, who was me. So like and then like now I have, is it five more siblings after that. So it's just like really, really cool to think of that testimony because I feel like that was a huge way that the Lord like completely changed the trajectory of my parents' lives. And there like 6 of us would not genuinely be here if they had stuck to that and like the Lord hadn't changed their hearts on that. So that's probably like the biggest thing because it genuinely involves like me being here or not. So like that's like the biggest thing I could think of.
Yeah, yeah. How do you feel being the first girl? Was it special? Is it kind of like, oh, you know?
I love it. I feel like it was really special because my 3 older brothers, like I definitely did like some of the tomboy stuff. Like I was out there, having sword fights outside and climbing trees and like all that stuff. But I also got to be like extremely uniquely feminine and the princess and like was very protected and taken care of. Like my big brothers are still like really sweet and like just like very protective. And then I got to experience that like having 3 guys paved the way and just having that surrounding like I have 6 brothers now. So like just being surrounded by very nurturing, tender, kind, and like protective males in my life. I just feel like and they also were really helpful in learning how to write guy POVs in books.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, that's good. That's good. Well, thanks for sharing. That's an awesome story. Okay, so tell the audience, you kind of mentioned this. Tell the audience a little bit about your upbringing. Did your family go to church? What was your home life like? How was it? being raised in a huge, I say huge, it's only me and my brother. So when you say you have eight
It
siblings, I'm
feels
like,
really huge.
yes, I only have one sibling. But I guess we have two in heaven because my mom had two miscarriages.
Mm.
But the family dynamic, like give the audience a little bit about how your upbringing was.
Yeah, so I grew up homeschooled as well. So we did school around the kitchen table. It was loud, it was noisy. There were multiple, mom had to like shift through kids of like, okay, it's your turn to do math. Like, get over here. Like, okay, now we're doing reading. And I just remember her like having to slot certain ones of us together in grades. Some of us were close in age, so like me and my brother are a year and a half apart, and there's a couple of groupings of siblings that were really close. So it worked out for her, like when it came to like the schooling side of things. But I remember a lot of it fondly because I just remember like this big, bustling, busy family feeling there. We people always worried like, oh my gosh, you're homeschooling. Like the biggest thing back then was like you're not going to be socialized. And we were like, no, we socialize so much. There's so many of us. Like, we're each other's best friends. We get on each other's nerves. Like, so much resolution conflict. You mentioned patience. Like, we weren't perfect, but we loved each other. And like, the goal was always to get through it and figure out, work our way out of an argument, even if we did disagree. So, that was just a really special. And when it comes to church, like, we went to like a pretty big mega church until I was about 5 or 6. So I very vaguely remember it. But we've actually been home churching for like most of my life, and that's been a really, really cool, rich experience for me because it's being able to grow in my faith as a family unit and have like just this level of intimacy and unity amongst people that we're really close with. And I feel like it's allowed me to grow in those relationships even more than the average person, like being really, really close with my siblings, my parents, like sharing, those deep, dark heart things that you wouldn't necessarily share in like a big church setting. And so getting to actually grow and do life together has been really cool. And it's been neat as we've all started to turn into adults. And, some of my siblings are married and starting to have kids, and like what that looks like now that some of us are adults and how like a lot of us still meet. Some of my older siblings go to different churches, but like having a lot of us still meet at home every Sunday and just have that really, like I said, intimate, special time together. And then of course like church is more than just like the building too. So I feel like we like do church throughout the week anytime. Like I would consider this a facet of church, getting to encourage each other and talk about the Lord and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, so it was a really cool experience. I also think like I say this often when it comes to like the home church experience that it felt like the Lord allowed us as young, like impressionable people to grow in a greenhouse until our roots were solid enough that when we are adults and now going out on our own, like our foundation is really solid
Yeah.
instead of, you know what I mean, being kind of blown by the wind or not really knowing where I stand on a lot of things. It allowed me to really dig deep and grow a lot of the foundations of theology and understanding of the Lord and his love. So that as an adult, I am a really strong person in the faith. So I really appreciate it and I'm grateful for it. I know that's not for everyone, but it's been something that I'm really blessed by.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for that answer. Briston met, I don't know if home church is just a northern thing. We lived in Iowa. My family, I was young, but that's like the only time we've lived up north. The rest of the time we've lived in Texas, Arkansas, Tennessee. I moved around a lot growing up. But Briston met my husband, he met some guys from it's one of the Dakotas. I always forget. It's North or South Dakota. And when they came to the faith, they would home church. And they in Briston had I know in the scriptures it talks about them meeting in homes, but
Mm-hmm.
like we had never seen that ever in our lives. And we'd have Bible studies at home and but we had never seen like a home church. And so he went up and visited them and he said it was like so cool what you're talking about, that intimate level, just the spirit moving. I feel like it's less, you can just like relax, if that makes sense,
Mm-hmm.
and just really be vulnerable. I don't think it's as intimidating because you're not walking to this huge sanctuary. It's like you're in a home, you're in a living room, you're
Yeah.
sitting, just having conversation. So yeah, he really enjoyed witnessing that and just seeing home church. So thanks for that. Um, okay, when did you know that you wanted to be an entrepreneur and a writer?
Oh gosh. Those are like kind of two separate things for me because I've been like an entrepreneur for, well, okay, I've been a writer for a really long time too, but I didn't start pursuing it as like authorship until much later. I started writing when I was really little. I've always loved books. I've loved reading. I devoured books as a kid. My poor parents were like, I don't know what else to give you to read. Like you're reading so much all the time. And like even when it came to like schoolwork, my favorite subjects were anything that had to do with words, like the construction of words, grammar. Like I loved grammar workbooks. I would just like fly through them in like my really younger years. So like I've always been a lover of words, a lover of story. I started like writing more specifically like actual stories, actual like books and stuff when I was probably before my teens, and then like my first book that I wrote was when I was 13. That was the first like book that I actually finished. Um, and so that was kind of the start of it, and I just like fell in love with it. And a lot of it just came from the desire of like I can't find what I want to read anymore. Like I feel like I've used up all of my reading stuff like resources, so I'm just gonna write what I want to read. And so that's kind of how it started, was mostly just for enjoyment. The entrepreneur side of things, like I think my first business was when I was 12. Like I've done so many different things, from like handmade note cards that I sold to family and friends and did craft fairs. Like I was even like 13 and doing craft fairs with my parents. Like my mom made candles and then I made note cards. And then sewing, I've done all different things. Like custom clothing is more recent, but in like my mid-teen years, I made wallets and purses and messenger bags. So yeah, I've just kind of like in and out of a lot of different like businesses, if you will. There's been a handful of them. So yeah, I started super young, and I think it was cool because my parents were very encouraging of it, like me desiring to take an art or a skill or a craft or desire that the Lord's given me and then use it to bless others while also being able to earn an income was something that I started super young. And I mean, my parents like bought me scrapbook stuff when I was making note cards, or they, you know what I mean, went with me to like this big garage sale to pick out all of the rubber stamps and things. And so it was just having parents who were like, yeah, let's do this. Like, absolutely. I think really allowed me at a young age to foster that desire and ability to just jump into something head first and see if it works.
Yeah.
And so I'm really grateful to them for that, because I feel like they could very easily been like, you're crazy, like you've got too much going on in that little head of yours, like come back to earth a little bit. But instead they allowed me to experiment with all those things, and I feel like it helped me a lot.
Yeah, that's so good. Yeah, you and Briston just y'all just inspire me so much, especially the entrepreneurship. Briston is always we live in a bigger city and he'll be driving and when he sees a need or a demand for something, he's like, "Oh, we could do this," or like we could do this. And his was the same way. He ever since he was little, like 12 years old, all throughout high school, he would like come up with all these different business ideas and just like and it's crazy to hear how similar, because y'all both have that skill. I mean, clearly it's y'all are visionaries. You see something and you just run with it. And it's so cool to see that like from such a young age it was implanted inside of you. And I know one of the guests, they're college pastors and they talked about how throughout their journey there was always this similarity. Like there was always teaching was always a
Mm,
desire, and then when they were in the youth and when God was like training them, they still had this reoccurring thing of like college students coming into their life. And it's cool to see, even with the story of Joseph, how like even though he was in a pit, he still was like he was over Potiphar's house. And
yeah.
even though he was in prison, he still was over the prisoners. And then he was over Egypt. And like, the reoccurring theme of what you're saying. And I don't know. I just want to encourage the audience that, like, probably what God's called you to do and your gifts and talents, you probably had them from a young age. I mean, just go back and think, like, what is something I'm passionate about? What is something that gains my interest? I mean, Victoria, like, I remember, I don't know how old I was, but I remember being super young in the car and like I didn't finish it, but I remember writing and my grandma asked me, "What are you doing?" And I'm like, "I'm writing a book." Now, it never got finished. I have no
Yeah.
idea what the thing was about. But just, and then falling in love with books, falling in love with fiction, imagination, like creating a world, and then creating characters, and now being older and like filling, pursuing that, filling that out.
Mm.
So yeah, it's just God's probably planted it inside of you ever since you were little. and like having the patience to see it develop over time. And that was just so awesome. I loved your answer with that. Okay, so one unique aspect of you and God's relationship. Oh my gosh, this is like I've been waiting for this question. Um, I'm like, I know it's in here, but I don't know when I'm gonna when it's so one unique aspect of you and God's relationship is that you request a word at the end of every year that represents what God wants you to do or what God wants to do in and through your life in the following year. So the before I'm going to ask, how did this get started? Were you taught to ask a word from God? Like, how did he get started? And this is the crazy thing, y'all. So, Victoria, we met actually a different Carley. We're friends, me and her. Our lives parallel, as weird as this sounds. We're both Carley, and she like messaged the Glory Riders through Instagram. So that's how I found y'all, was not
Okay.
like through this friend, which was an answered prayer because at that time I was really seeking a writing community. I didn't have anyone except for this friend. And then, she brought y'all. I love y'all's mission. You're going to go over that in a minute. Um, and but I ever since I guess the end of 2018, the beginning of 2019, God has like I've asked God for a word. And it's like so crazy because this wasn't something like it just blows my mind because this wasn't something that someone taught me. Like literally,
Yeah.
I really like New Year's resolutions. I know so many people bash New Year's
Yeah.
resolutions.
Oh, yeah.
But I like love them. I'm like, you have a year to pursue this goal. And like, I don't know. Everyone has their own opinion. But so at the end of 2018, I was just scrolling through Pinterest and I was like, God, I want a word for 2019. It was such this small, like, I did not realize how big God would answer that
Mm,
request. Because I was thinking, I don't know what I was thinking, but he took it in such a new level. Like he broke strongholds. I mean, it's amazing what he did with that one tiny request. And
yeah.
every year after that, I've asked the Lord for a word. And but I when I met you and I saw on social media you posted about your words, I was like, bro, this is like other
I thought
people
I was
do
the only
this.
one.
Yeah, like this is a real thing. And I've learned over the years a lot of people do this. And but so how did this start for you? Like um
Yeah. I'm trying to think of like how it started initially because like I know it's always been my mom's thing like when we were little and before we like really knew a whole lot like we're all like, oh my gosh, mom's all excited about the word for the year and we got to think of something. And like like as a kid, and so like I think it's definitely more like it's grown into something so beautiful for our family because we have like a word party every New Year's and those of us who participate all gather and it's very much like that home church vibe and like it's just like this is what the Holy Spirit's showing me, this is what the Lord's asking me of me this year, like this is the word I felt like he impressed in my spirit. And like it's become such a powerful thing for our family because it's more than just like us as individuals, like we're holding each other accountable, like we all know each other's words, we're, you know what I mean, excited to hear testimonies of what the Lord does in each other's lives each year. And so it really just started with my mom being faithful with I think something the Lord gave her, like the Lord was like, here, you should do this. And she, like, some of us she's dragged kicking and screaming, not me, but like other people in our family, I won't name names. But like other people in our family, she's definitely had to be like, come on, you need a word. Like if you don't get one, I'm gonna give you one, like kind of thing. But just out of like, good natured joking. But at the end of the day too, like it has become something so powerful. And so like for me, becoming an adult, again, kind of growing into my maturity in Christ, like growing more in relationship with him every year, like it's taken on like this new level of meaning. And I don't know if it's the same for you, but it almost feels like it gets better and better each year.
yes.
Like you're just like, oh my god, it's so much more powerful than last year. So yeah, like it's just been, and like you said too, like I feel like he's used them and they're not always fun words. Like I think a lot of people too, like some people just genuinely pick a word for themselves for the year of like, I'm going to focus on this or I'm going to focus on that. Like
Yeah.
for me, it's become such a relational thing with the Lord of like, okay, Lord, what do you want me to focus on this year? What do you want to teach me? How do you want to grow me? Um, and it's always been like, and like it's probably from him when you get it and you're like, oh, that's not really what I would have picked, but like I'll see how this would be good for me, you know? So yeah, like that's kind of how it got started in our family and just like what it's become and stuff. And he's used it in some pretty crazy ways in my life for sure.
That's cool. That's cool. So I know like with the Lord, like I will see a word and it like gets highlighted. Like
Mm-hmm.
it will just it was so funny because it was it last year? I'm like now it's been like 5 or 6 words. I write them all down, but I get confused of like
Yes.
what was the year
Which
for
year
this
was
word.
what? Yeah.
Yeah. But one year it was the word vision and
Mm.
the it was December. I'm like the end of the year, I'm praying for what the word is. And Briston and I are dating, and I get on social media and I see an ad and it says a vision board. And I'm like, Briston, I think the word is vision. And Briston was like, well, I'm gonna need more confirmation than that. Like it's,
That's just what I
he's like, yeah, yeah. He's like, that was an ad, Carly. Like, and so we go to church the next Sunday, and our pastor literally gets on stage and he says, today I want to talk about God's vision. And yes,
did
I'm
you
not
like look
even
at each
joking.
other like,
Oh,
okay.
I know. Yeah. I was like, is this the confirmation you need? Because like, how can you get
Oh
more
my word.
of that? It was
Yeah.
so cool. And then so I want to ask you, what is your word for this year? How does God confirm it? And then also, like throughout the year, is there a tangible confirmation of the word? Because I've noticed over the years, there has been like the word vision. I can literally go get the book. I'm actually gonna go get it. Hang on. It's right
Yeah,
here.
do it.
Um, okay. We went to usually he confirms it by the end of the year, like towards the end of the year. This year it was the earliest. It was, I think, June or July. We went to youth camp and we were leaders for the youth camp, and they had a bookstore. And you go in the bookstore,
You
you're
always
like,
got to browse the bookstore.
yes, like every time we'd get a break, I would go into the bookstore. Well, this book, we were engaged at the time. This book, The Seven Rings of Marriage, just kept like, I would always go back to it. Briston was like, just buy the book, Carly. So I bought it. Yeah. So I bought it and started reading it. And it's on page 30. Yes, I flipped the page. We're like in the van at this point. The conference is over. We're on our way home. All the youth kids are in the van. Our pastor's driving, all stuff. And we're in the van and I'm reading this book and I flipped to page 34 and it has the seven rings of marriage. And it's these seven different rings. And the first ring is called the engagement ring. And it says, the beginning, think vision, vision filled with hope, love, and possibility. You have no real clue of what challenges lie ahead as it seems blissful. And it was this like literal physical
That was like not even just like the Lord confirming it, but also like specifically tied to your season of life too.
I know. And I was like, oh my gosh, this word came to pass. Like I've always noticed with the word that happened with the first word. I mean, it's happened year after year where there's like a physical coming to pass of the word. And
Mm.
it was just so this book just popped out. Like, I don't know, it just
Like the nudging of the Holy Spirit for sure. Just like, yeah.
yeah, and it's like it wasn't like I was like, oh, I knew God wanted me to get this book. It just like kept catching my
Yeah.
attention. And so, anyways, well, yeah, how is it for you? And what has your experience been?
Yeah, so I'm trying to, so my word for this year is patience. Not 100% fully sure like what that, I'm already seeing it in like little ways. Like there's been like certain like projects and things that he's put on my heart that I feel like are just going to require like a level of patience that like maybe I haven't experienced before, like a new level of growth in that. Um, and it was really hard. Like this, I'm not gonna lie. Like this year was like kind of hard and emotional. So my brother, who I'm super duper close with, like we're like this in their family, just like pairing wise, we were both single. surrounded by married siblings, and just like really like close in the Lord and being able to like encourage each other and stuff. So he like met his wife, fell in love, and got married really quickly this past year, and their wedding was in December. And so like, you're coming down from all those emotions, the high of excitement and all that stuff, and the word that the Lord puts on my heart is patience. And I'm like, ugh, you know what I mean? Like, you're just like, my brother's dreams just came true. Like, my heart like obviously wants all of that as well. And so like, to get patience, you're just like dagger to the heart a little bit. um but yeah, so like the Lord always just like brings it around too with scripture for me. And there was something that I noticed this year that I feel like he was really highlighting, was how hope and faith are so directly tied with patience, that your faith and your hope grows when you walk in patience. And so that was something too of like, the Lord's like, I feel like patience can be such a negative thing of like, oh, you need to be learn to be patient because life is hard, and like life is pain. Sometimes
Yeah.
you just got to be patient with people, like it kind of take on that negative connotation. But I feel like he was like really flipping the word for me of like, patience is not a negative thing. Like, your hope is going to grow exponentially as a result of your patience. Like, your faith is going to grow exponentially. And like, not only that, but like, patience comes in holding on to the hope of what's to come, like the hope of the promise fulfilled. That's what patience comes from. So it's just like kind of seeing the word sandwiched between hope. And I was like, this is so much more powerful and special and beautiful than just the idea of you just got to wait, you know what I mean, and be patient.
Yeah.
Like, patience is more than waiting. Patience is more than you know what I mean, not complaining about waiting. It's genuinely like fueled by and grows you towards a hope. And so that was really encouraging. That was kind of like the way that he confirmed it for me this year. I mean, my word for the year has like radically changed my life in many different ways, from the standpoint of like, I quit my job as a result of one of my words for the year. Like, he completely changed my mindset about money and income one year just as a result of a word. So yeah, it is a really powerful thing as well. And I think it's so much of it is, I feel like people look at it and they're like, oh, you just picked a word out of thin air. It's like, no, like the Holy Spirit, like when our listening, like when I was hearing your story, like you were asking the Lord for a word, like he's faithful to answer and show up. You know what I mean? Like when we ask him for something, he's just waiting for that moment and that extension of us asking for a relationship with him. And so he's not going to leave us hanging. You know what I mean? He's a good
Yeah.
father. He's not the kind of dad who's just like, I'll see you later. Like, no big deal. You got to figure this out on your own. Like, he's just waiting for us and excited for us to reach out and ask him. And so, of course, he's going to answer. Of course, he's going to show up and confirm it, you know?
Yes, that is so good. Oh, I love what you're saying. It reminds me of, so recently I went through Genesis. We did this study through Genesis, and as we were reading Abraham's story, there was this revelation of why did God have them wait so long to have
Mm,
Isaac? And he continued, like what you're talking about, this hope, this patience. He continued to grow in his faith. There was this revelation of, oh my gosh, when they actually had Isaac, they were a testimony. Like,
mm,
I'm sure they had friends and family members who all had kids young, who all wanted to be the young mom and the young parents and all the stuff. And for them, it was patiently enduring. But like when they had Isaac, they had this beautiful story that was so
mm,
powerful to say, like,
mm.
God came through. And like they have this testimony of, and I don't know, I know, like, I know you're single. I know you're like being patient and stuff. And my aunt did not get married until she was 37. She has one son when he was 39. I am believing she's 41. I'm believing that she's going to have another child. And her story of like enduring, and she
Mm,
really didn't desire to get married until she was 30. Like that's when she really started being like, okay, God, like
like,
this
hello.
is, yeah, like this is something that I actually want. But she had to endure 7 more years. But the man
Mm,
she met, like I saw this quote. I know we're gonna have to hop back on here, but I saw this quote. I wish I would have saved it. And it was talking about it's better to marry late than to marry wrong.
amen.
And
Yeah.
yes, and like she tells her story of she had multiple guys. She had a guy in college. She had like multiple guys in her life, Christian guys. Like
Mhm.
Christian guys. I put quotation marks because
Yeah.
you got to be careful. Christian guys who like wanted to get married, but she was like, "No, like this is not there were some red flags. There were some things that she desired that it wasn't
Yeah.
time, right? It wasn't the right
Mhm.
person. And the man she married, I mean, he is like phenomenal and he has his own story.
Yeah.
And I know with Briston, this was something that hit because when I was in college, I was like, well, am I like, I had friends getting married, getting engaged, and I was like, am I doing something wrong? Like, I would
Right.
almost
Yeah.
look at like singleness as like, I have to do these things in order to get married, like
Yeah.
the stepping stool. And my husband and I are 3 years apart. And I was a senior when he was a freshman. Okay. I know that sounds crazy, but it's okay. And he's very mature for his age, as I'm
I
sure
feel
you
like that
are.
age gap goes away the older you get. Like it's just kind
Yes.
of like you meet in the middle.
Yes. Well, there's a lady at our church. They're 12 years apart. Her and her husband are 12 years apart. I'm like, oh, great. That makes our 3 years
You're
nothing.
like, I'm fine.
Yeah, yeah. But like all throughout college, I was like, what am I doing wrong? Like, why am I not meeting my person yet? And then when Briston came and we met and we started getting engaged, I realized, oh, okay, timing. Like God
Yeah.
cannot
Oh,
work
for sure.
outside of human timing. He was in high school. Hey, God couldn't like magically send him to college. He had to graduate high school
Yeah. Go through
and
life.
then
Yeah.
yeah, and then he could come to college. So I think, the verse that says, trust in the Lord with all your heart and do not lean on your own understanding. I think that is so hard because from our perspective, we're like, hello, why is this not happening? And it's
Yeah, we
like,
have our own understanding and awareness of the world, and we're like, what's taking so long? But like, my mom always reminds me of this too. She's like, there's two parts of the equation. She's like, you might, be ready for all we know. Like, you could be ready, but what if he's not? And I
yeah,
think that's the thing too, like just what you're talking about. Like, I've always, and I think I've been so grateful because I feel like the Lord's giving me a heart that has so much peace and comfort in that I've never been the person who's just like, oh, I can't, like, it's taking for, you know what I mean? Like, I never feel like I can get stuck there because at deep down, like, I truly trust that his timing is perfect. And I would rather it be in his timing than step outside of his timing because I know that his plans for me are good. His heart for me is good. And even if that means I don't get to get married till I'm 50, like, like his timing is going to be perfect. And so like hearing testimonies like yours and like my brother's even older than I am. So like it's totally fine that he got married first. I'm not complaining about that at all. My sister-in-law's amazing. But it's just like you know what I mean? Like God knew when the right timing. It was for both of them too. Like it's their story's crazy. But like if they'd have met each other any earlier, it wouldn't have made sense. If they'd have met
yeah,
each other any later, it might not have made sense. And so like just knowing that he's got this plan down to the letter, like his timing is so perfect. And that there's such like you were talking about that testimony, like the reward and the testimony and the like story of his glory that's going to come out of whatever his timing is way more important to me than just being married.
yes, that's so good. So in 2022, you had the word jump when you kind of went over this. And during
Yes.
that time, you were working for another business, full time. You hadn't fully released what we know now as the Glory Riders. It was like, I think it was, you kind of were trying to pursue it on the side.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so describe that journey of jumping out in faith. Was it scary, or did you feel like you were like Joseph and had this undeniable confidence that God was going to provide somehow in some way for you?
Yeah, I mean a little bit of both. I think it's normal to be like my safety net's gone. Like, you know what I mean? Like, yeah, the year before, December before, I was like again praying for a word from the Lord. And it's always been on my heart to be like full-time entrepreneur, like even in working full-time jobs, like I've always like pulled so many hours because like I'd come home at night, work for hours on end. I do what I could in the morning. Like weekends were just crammed with work, and it honestly wasn't a very sustainable way of life because I was very stressed all the time. But I was just like always working towards that goal, and it had been on my heart for a long time. And so I remember exactly where on the highway I was. I was driving to work. I was like randomly, I think I was listening to music or something. And just like I have like random conversations with the Lord. Like there's nothing formal about prayer life for me. I'm literally just like, do like just talking with the Lord and having conversation. And I was like, I wonder what my word for the year is going to be, and jump ran into my head immediately. And I was like, Okay, but like, are we sure that's not me? Like, was that just me? Because like, it's been on my heart for a long time, and I was like, just the repercussions. I knew what that meant immediately. Like, I knew it meant kind of taking that leap of faith in that specific way. And I'm like, is that just me trying to manufacture this word? Is that actually the Holy Spirit? Like, okay, like so I was like praying about it, and he confirmed it in so many different ways. Like there was like word, like you were saying, like words being highlighted, like prophetic words being highlighted. Like I actually had a dream as well that was like very specific and clearly tied to it for me. Like it was metaphorical, but there was a point in the dream where I had to basically grab onto something and jump out over basically a burning inferno below me. And there was like this Jesus figure behind me who was like, "No, I got you. You can do this." And he also like held off everybody else in the dream, everybody who was like, "Oh my gosh, don't do it." Like he also was like, "No, she's got this." And like let me like jump and swing out and like I was fine and everything. And so like it was like that prophetic dream was just like really powerful, and I was just like praying about it, and I just felt like he was so highlighting it to me. So, January, February, like I think um either March or April, I think it was like 3 or so months in, I kind of had this in my head. I was like, I think it's gonna be April. And so I just kind of started working that direction. Like their work was just kind of, I don't know, the job I was in was not super fulfilling. It was not an easy job. Um, there was also not a lot of work for me. Like I love to be busy, and so I don't like jobs where you just like sit around and wait for a lot of the time. Like it drives me crazy because I'm like, give me something to do. I want to be busy. And so there's just like a lot of factors. And like, yeah, my dad was like, do you have like an emergency fund? Do you have money saved that you're going to be fine? Like, if you start doing a lot of the stuff that you're doing full time, like, are you going to be able to, pay bills, do whatever you got to do? And I was like, I think so. But at the end of the day, like, I, I don't know what's going to happen. Like, I just kind of have to like walk out in faith here. And so like on my emergency fund, I mean like maybe 2 grand. Like I did not have a lot of money saved in the bank. It was like a couple months of expenses, maybe if that. Um, and at this point too, like I mean, like publishing book is expensive. Like you got to invest in a lot of different things, and like that's the thing with running a business. Like so much of my income goes out immediately because you're just reinvesting it into product, into services, into programs that you use. Like it was just so much, and but it just felt so much peace about it. I did end up having a little bit of a cushion. I was able to convert my current job into a what's the right word? A contract job. So I had them for 3 months. But then they dropped me after 3 months. So I was like, this is going to be really easy. I'm going to have way more time. I'm going to still be doing a lot of the same things I was for, 10 hours a week instead of 40. And I'll have that cushion. And so like the Lord allowed me that for 3 months, but it was very much just like cut and run, like see what happens kind of thing. And there's been a lot of ups and downs, but at the end of the day, like he's provided, and it's been 2 full years now. So there's been slim pickings. Like there have been seasons where I didn't get to buy fun things and I didn't get to go out to lunch. You know what I mean? Like you make sacrifices and you make decisions, but um at the end of the day, like yes, I did feel very confident in it just because he made it really clear, and I feel like he gave me so much peace about it. Like I think that's too, it's like, yeah, God asks us to do hard things, but at the end of the day, if it's being led by his spirit, he equips you for what he calls you to. And he's going to give you the vision. He's going to give you the peace. He's going to give you the confidence to do something that he's called you to do when he's called you to do it, you know?
Yeah, that is really good. I remember what you're saying. I mean, it is scary. Like jumping out in faith, quitting your job, it is not easy. It is when we moved to Texas from Arkansas, that was the thing was I felt like God was like, you're going to be at home. You're going to depend on Briston's business full time. So because I was older, I graduated sooner. So he worked on his business in college, but um when we got married, I like had a full-time job, which had a lot of benefits. It had
Oh,
retirement,
yeah.
it had like medical insurance, dental, vision, all this stuff. Every month you're getting income, like, and when we moved here, I remember, and like I do think parents mean best. I mean, um my mom, when we were about to move, which the Lord was so cool because I didn't have to, you want your parents' support. Like with whatever you do, you
Yeah.
want them to be behind you. And she meant so well. But I remember every time I'd be like, Mom, I feel like when we move, I'm supposed to not work. And now it's crazy because I'm pregnant and I've always wanted to be a stay-at-home mom. And so like seeing the Lord like bring that to pass. We didn't know we were going to get pregnant when,
Mm,
we moved. And then also because of the condition I have, I couldn't get pregnant on the medicine that I took for I have
mm,
narcolepsy. So I had to get off the medicine before we conceived. So like
mm.
it was like, and in order for me to get off the medicine, I had to stop working. So it like all
Yeah,
made sense. But I remember my mom being like, well, what are you gonna do? And then also Victoria, like what you were saying, I'm like working full time and trying to write. It was hard. Like
it's
I would have to,
exhausting.
yes, I would have to get up at like 5 a.m., try to write for an hour before I got ready for work. And like you're mentally tired and you're trying to use your brain. And then when you get off work, you're exhausted. You want to
Yeah,
spend time with your people. I remember trying to write, I'd be falling asleep. Like,
yeah.
and
And I mean
it
too, like not to change the topic too much, but like God
no,
didn't
you're
create us
good.
to do that. Like God didn't create like not even just like one of the things I was studying like around the time the Lord was like asking me to jump, I was so fascinated by because like females and men's hormones like cycles are built so differently. Like I was just like the advantage that men have. Like I was like remember just being so tired, so stressed half the time and like having all because I worked with male dominated fields multiple times and like all these guys just wandering so chill, like so rested. I'm like, what in the world? Until I realized like men's cycle literally starts over at night. Like it's like they have a day long cycle. They start off in the morning with all the energy. It slowly runs out over time. They go to sleep and they wake up renewed. Unfortunately, we do not have that. Like, well, I guess fortunately, because it allows us to do other things. But like our God did not create female bodies to work a 9 to 5. Like it does not fit within like the constructs of like how our body was wired. And so like that was just like all in my head too, like right when I quit as well. And I feel like it's allowed me working an entrepreneur. Like, yeah, people thought I was crazy. Family members were like, well, what do you do? You know what I mean? You get all the questions and all the confusion and the like concern. But at the end of the day, like my health is more important than a consistent paycheck.
Yes.
And yeah, there was a lot of like mental adjustment you have to make because like you're saying I can't count on that couple grand a month anymore. Like it might be less, it might be more, praise the Lord when it is, but it's not consistent and I don't know when it's coming in and it might be not for a few weeks or it might be right away. Like I don't know. But I feel like it's allowed me to embrace like so much more balance and like teach myself how to like balance that as well of like being because you have to set your own boundaries. Like it's almost more work because instead of
Yeah.
having that set 9 to 5, I now am in charge of it. And so like I have to be on the ball and on the roll of like, okay, no, I'm gonna take the day off because I'm not feeling the greatest and I need to take care of myself. Or you know what I mean? Like I family time at night is important. So I need to have my computer off by 5 p.m., you know? And so yeah, there's just been so much to it that I feel like he's brought a lot of freedom to my life in more ways than just not being a part of the corporate machine anymore, but also just being able to live a more balanced and free life and like have those abilities to do the things he's called me to do.
Yes, yes, that's so good because okay, a couple of things. I love this conversation. This is like I remember my college pastor before I ever met Briston. She was an entrepreneur. She had her own preschool while like before and while they did ministry. And she told me, she said, when you are an entrepreneur, you never have time off. She was like, you get emails constantly. It's never like you can shut things off. You can shut your
Mm-hmm.
computer off, but what she was saying is like if someone calls in the middle of the night, especially with the preschool and something happens, and like I do think it depends on your industry. But if something happens, like you're what
It's
you're
on
saying,
you.
you're in charge. And I think there's like this preconceived notion of like, oh, if you own your own business, like you
You're
get
not working at all.
yeah, and it's like, no, you don't understand. Like we get emails all the time from Briston's business. Like, and it's so cool too because just the desires that God plants inside of you. And like I remember being in high school and I remember wanting to work with my husband. That has always been a desire
Mm,
to like work with my husband. And it's so funny because I didn't know that that was a God desire. Like it's not like I could say, "Oh, God
mm,
gave me this desire," Um,
yeah.
but it's cool now because I'm like, oh, like that's came
Planted
to
that seed
pass.
ahead of
Yes.
time. Yeah.
Yes. And it's like I get to help him and I get to be there for him. And I don't know what he would have done. He does like events. So we go and host races and it is a lot of work. And it's funny because I'm like, Kristen, what would you have done like without like without another, without help or whatever.
How
But
would you have answered all your emails without me? Like,
yeah, yeah, yeah. But no, like what you're saying of just, and I think that it goes back to faith and hope. Like with us, we are so dependent on God where we're at. If we would have
mhm,
stayed, and what number one, what you were saying about that full-time job not being fulfilling, girlfriend, yeah, I remember like being in my full-time job and it was so hard because I'm like, I loved the people I worked with. They were great. I knew that wasn't what God called me to do. I'm like, okay. And I feel like you can tell when a season is about to change
oh, for
because,
sure.
yes, because at first when I started, that was what God wanted me to do. And it served a season. I worked there for 2 years, maybe. I don't even think 2 years. But like when I first started, it was awesome. We were running, like go running. And then it was crazy because I graduated with my master's, and it was like the Lord was saying, Carley, my son, Jesus is coming back soon. I have called you to do things. And I
Mhm.
remember listening to a podcast, and she was a professor at a Bible school. And she said, if she's not careful, she can get caught up in God work, like busy work, because she works at a Bible school and neglect these specific projects that God has called her to do. And she talked about how, like, she, even in her professor life, has to make time for things that God has called her to do aside from
Yeah.
that. And it was like that, Victoria. It was like I was doing this job and I was like serving in our college ministry, doing like these, serving at our church, doing these like
Mm.
good things. But it's like, okay, God has called you to specific tasks, like writing. I felt like he was like, it's now or never. Like,
Yeah. Like, I'm asking
you
you to do
gotta,
this.
yeah,
Yeah.
like I'm calling you to do this and you gotta get started. And so just, I don't know, I just want to encourage the audience that like, listen, what Victoria was saying, when she jumped, it was time for her to jump. And like, it's scary. But
It's
it's
okay to
so
be
worth it.
scared. Like,
Yeah. And you can probably say too, I know with our jump to move to Texas, because that was scary, quitting my job, depending on Bristol's business, all of that. Like the Lord has truly blessed us in so many ways, not just, I'm not talking necessarily about financially, but like blessed us with a community, with a church, blessed us in so many ways. I believe because we were obedient and because we
mhm.
listened to him and because we obeyed. Had we not obeyed, I am sure we would have been miserable because we would have not been where he wanted us to be.
Yeah. Yeah, like I said earlier, like he provides and he's faithful to, equip you to do what he asks you to do. And like when there is that obedience, there's that grace. You know what I mean? Like there's not a whole lot of grace existing when you're walking in disobedience. And so when you are being obedient, there's grace to do it. And to like that's not to say that like every time you obey that a door is gonna open, but by the same standpoint, like that's his heart for us. And like it's up to us too. Like I know a very dear friend of mine who they did take a leap of faith at one point, and it felt like they hit brick wall after brick wall. But after, there's disappointment that you go through. But after a period of time, like you start to see like, okay, God saved us from something else. Like God had us here for a season, even though it felt like no doors were opening, he had us here waiting on him to teach us something, to grow us in something, to potentially protect us from something else. Like even when
Yeah.
you can't see that tangible door opening or that tangible provision, like I fully believe like we can trust him to know that like that's his best for us because we were obedient.
Yes, and we've had like our church community, we've had so many things happen that we didn't know. It wasn't like God was like, okay, if you obey me, I'm going to open these doors. It's
Right.
like literally, Victoria, I remember the first thing he asked was quit your job. He didn't tell me why. He didn't say,
Yeah. If you
XYZ.
quit your job, you're going to have XYZ available to you
Yes.
later. Like he doesn't
Yes.
tell us that.
Yes. It was like, okay. And then like that was so scary going to my boss and being like, and what
Why
you're
is it
saying.
so scary talking to bosses? I was the same way. You feel like you're going to pass out. I'm like, why? This is not a big deal. I'm just human too.
Yes. And then it's like once I did that, then he revealed like the next thing. And then it was like once I did that, then he revealed the next thing. So Yeah. Okay. What is the mission slash goal behind the Glory Riders, and what services do y'all offer?
So many. The reason being because like the goal and heart behind Glory Writers was to be like a one-stop shop for authors who are wanting to pursue the Lord's calling on their life to write books that honor and glorify him. So we started off with a pretty limited roster, but like our main focuses are community education and then service. So we everything that we do kind of falls into those three tiers. So initially, Glory Writers actually started out years and years and years ago before it was like the business that we know now, doing retreats. So I hosted like the first ever Glory Writers retreat in 2015 or 16. It was a long time ago. And I knew it was going to be something really big, but I didn't know what yet. And I just was like, okay, I'm just going to hold on to this little dream until like the Lord brings it to pass. And so yeah, now all these years later, I've been in the service industry like for publishing for years. I've done it like on my own before I started creating like the conglomeration of Glory Writers, but I've done like cover design, formatting, editing, and that kind of stuff on the side. And so now we just do it under the umbrella of Glory Writers. And so we offer um, like a lot of education stuff. We our author adventure program, which is about a year-long writing program that like teaches you all like the A to Z of not just writing but also publishing. So we like walk students through like the very beginning process of like dreaming with the Lord about your story, like crafting it with him, story craft, writing, and then into publishing when it comes to publishing, marketing, um, platform building, all of that stuff. So that's been like a work of love, and that's a big program that we offer. We also do coaching, which we've gotten to coach you before, so that's been really fun.
Yeah.
And we do so that's like kind of under the education stuff. We also do the services. So we'll do like basically anything your book needs to get it published, we'll do. So we cover design, formatting, which is typesetting, three different types of editing, which is like our most popular service that we offer. Um, yeah. So like that's just like a tiny list of all of the crazy stuff that we do. But like I said, it all kind of boils down to wanting to build community, wanting to be that one-stop shop for authors who can work with people that they trust and that they know want to honor them in their story, to get it out into the world.
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah, I was so glad. And y'all are indie publishing, right?
Yes, yeah. So we with our program, like we teach both sides of it. So we have like one of our instructors is traditionally published and she's worked in as an agent in the traditionally published arena. So we teach both in our program just because I think journey is different for everybody. But yeah, I indie publish and then we started our own small press as well called Glory Writers Press. So we publish some pretty special Christian fiction books, if I do say so myself.
Yes, I hope I can publish with y'all. I'm like still going through edits.
Okay, well, I will have my eyes peeled for an email with your name on it someday. So,
Yes. Honestly, my goal is to like have it fully edited before the summer. So you should get that around, I don't know,
oh,
June-ish. Yeah. Okay. So can you explain a little bit about your current writing journey? Your passions, projects?
yeah. So my current projects are the Chronicles of Alira. So I'm currently working on drafting book three, which is turning into a bit of a beast. I feel like it's like so much bigger than I thought it was going to be, kind of because it's bridging the gap between the first two books and like setting the stage for this last two books because it's going to be a 5 book series. So it's been a lot of work. That's been partly where my word patience has come in because it's taken me a lot longer than I wanted it to. But yeah, I'm hoping, Lord willing, that I'll have the rough draft finished within a few weeks. So we're getting really close. Um, but yeah, so that's where I'm at with that book. That series is kind of what I'm working on. I might have a few like side projects that might pop in here and there. But my goal and like my main focus has been to get that out and finished. So I'll probably be in Alira for a while. So
Yeah.
that's what I'm working on right now. Once I knew published a couple or 2 years ago now, and then this life of mine is going to turn one in actually, what day is it? It's going to
It's
turn one in 3 days. So
cool. Can you believe that?
so
I remember when you
I
released
know.
it.
I know. I feel like it was just like yesterday. Although at the same, like I definitely do feel some distance. Like a lot of stuff has happened since then. Last year was just crazy, but yeah, I was like, I don't know if I'm ready to revisit it yet. Like it's hardly been a year yet.
Do you feel like the more the because you have how many books total published? Like,
Five
okay, yeah.
published that are like not that are fiction, and then I have like a couple of like co-author things that I've done with some other stuff.
Okay, cool. Do you feel like in your fiction journey, the more books you write, the better your like imagination, character building, character development, plot, all of that. Do you feel like that improves over time?
For sure. Like my first book, I've been tempted to take it down many times until the Lord's been like, no, I still have plans for it. But it's yeah, my first book is like nowhere near as good technically as like my later books. I definitely have grown as a writer. Um, but I think too, like every journey is so different too, like every single book, even like in the same series, every book has been such a wildly different journey, like process. I feel like he's taught me so many different things over the course of each book. And so, yeah, even though, like I said, I want it, technically speaking, London in the Dark is not the best book in the world. I definitely, and none of mine are, but I wanted to take it down before, and I feel like the Lord was like, no, I've had purpose in every story, and like I've used every story. So, like, it's just a part of the journey. You know what I mean? Like, and so if I just feel like it's kind of a special memento of like seeing how you grow through that time
Yeah.
period, and like readers being able to experience that as well as like, she did this. You know what I mean? Like, it's not great and it's not perfect, but she pulled it off and like the Lord put this together too.
Yeah, my grandma, she got me Ernest Hemingway's. It's all of his short stories, but it's in chronological order. So it starts when he first started writing short
Oh
stories.
wow.
Yes.
I bet
And
that's probably cool.
yes, and then it goes like, and when you read it, you can see his growth and you can see like how he growed. And I know for me, whenever I first started writing this fiction book, it's my first fiction book ever. It's like I had no confidence, which I
Yeah.
think is huge because in anything you do, like you have to have confidence because if you don't have confidence, you're always going to doubt yourself. And I
Hmm.
found that like I felt like the Lord was calling me to write it, but because I had no confidence, I would literally like type something, delete it, type something, delete it,
Yeah.
and I would sit there forever. And now I'm finally getting to the point where I'm like, okay, it's not probably like there are plenty of writers who write a whole lot better than I do, but it's finally to a point where I'm like gaining confidence and
Yeah.
I'll read something and be like, okay, that sounds pretty good. Like, and like,
Yeah.
I don't know. So it is cool to um and like I've had to like through y'all, through the realm makers, through hearing other authors, like hearing y'all and like growing has truly helped. So I do want to say whatever you want to grow in and whatever you're trying to do, like find people who are already successful in that area because they're gonna talk about their experience. And I loved Victoria, is her last name McCombs? It's something like that.
Yeah.
Yes, she talked about it was so reassuring because she talked about in her first book that she wrote, she usually your character is supposed to drive the plot, and she said that her character didn't. You could like replace the main character with any character and the plot still would happen. Like she drove the
Mm.
plot, her main character didn't drive the plot, and she just talked about but she still said people loved the story. Like there were a ton of plot holes and questions weren't answered. And
Yes.
she's like,
Yeah.
but people still commented and said, oh my gosh, this is amazing. And like, so that was reassuring because it's like, okay, what you're saying, like it can still be used and it is growing pains.
Yeah, for sure. And I think too, like there's something so specific. Like I think you were talking about confidence, and I think a lot of that too can just be like finding your voice as a writer. Like was hard, and you don't have that confidence initially. And I just remember like one of the things that I've grown a lot in over the years of writing has been being confident in like what my story choices are. Like I just remember the first book I published, and like with beta reading and stuff, like one of my dearest friends like gave me some of the most crushing pieces of like critique, and like at the time I took it so to heart and was like kind of broken over it and like second guessing myself and trying to figure out how to fix it. And like one of the things she told me was that your writing is too emotional, like it's too your characters are having too many emotions and like crying too much and like all this stuff and like being too dramatic. And like at the time I was like, what? But like now it's so cool because I feel like the Lord's reinforced that in me of like that's actually something that makes my writing very unique and specific is the fact that I do dive deep into the characters' heads, their hearts, their emotions, like what he's speaking to them. You're not just looking at this character from the outside perspective. So like my ability to be extremely empathetic and compassionate and like to a fault in the emotion department actually helps me be able to bring these characters to life in a unique way that has ended up blessing a lot of people because they're able to see themselves in those struggles.
Yes, that's so good. I remember when Livy, she edited. It was horrible, that draft that I
Oh,
had to
I'm sure it
edit.
wasn't that
I'm
bad.
like, oh no, oh no. It was like now compared to what I've done, I'm like, oh my gosh, I like had somebody read that. Like that is terrible. But growing pains. But she read it and she commented, she was like, and she meant no harm in this. Like she is such a lovely person, but she
Yeah.
said your writing can come off as preachy, even though like when you read the fiction story, there's no pastor, there's no mention of Christian. It's like an imaginative
Like
world.
it can
There's
be a
no,
tonal thing. Yeah.
yeah, like a lost person can read it and like not be like, oh, this is, but like I think from being a Christian, she could see the, and she said it comes off as preachy. And I was like, at first I was like, oh my gosh, but then, especially with my mom, just like realizing who you are, like what you're saying, like
Mhm.
who God's created you to be. And there, yeah, there are times where I probably come across to people as like too much and like, whatever,
Mm.
preachy and just, but
Yeah.
like I can't, that's who I am. And
Yeah.
so realizing that like that's probably a gift and a blessing in the writing and like being okay with that, like I'm not trying to push things on people, but like tell the truth and like I don't know how to explain it, but like I've had to learn
Yeah.
to not dull and not like water down what I feel like God is
Mhm.
calling me to write. And she said like you don't have to change your writing if you don't want to. I'm just telling you. She's like I'm just telling you what people might critique you on and what they might, say
Mhm.
about it and stuff. And I've had to like be okay with, you know what? If
Yeah.
even if they think that like if this is what God's called me to
It
write,
doesn't have
like
to be a negative necessarily. Like,
yeah, 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 like who cares? I remember at the Railmakers, that lady who won the award, she won an award. She literally said it was the most preachy writing she had ever done.
yeah. Yeah.
Yes. And
Yeah.
I was
And that's
like,
the thing too, like, yeah. I'm glad like you were able to like analyze that too, because I think that's like the biggest thing with like developmental editing that like if I could encourage somebody, it's like to be able to, you really have to have a clear head. And I think like the biggest thing with receiving edits of any kind is being separating yourself from the work too. You know what I mean? Like being able to be
yeah,
like when your work's critiqued, it's like we're not critiquing you. You know what I mean? Like this is just
yeah,
like how it's perceived or whatever. And so being able to look at it of like, okay, so is this actually, did I mean to portray it that way? And do I want to keep that or do I want to do something different? Like it's kind of more like an observation and you get to choose what your decision making part about it is. And
yes.
so like I'm really glad to like use that, like God used that to kind of show you like, oh, that made you more confident in your voice and more confident in the way that you wrote, you know?
Yes. I think being a graphic design major, that has helped because we got critiqued all the time. And constantly our professor was like, she was like, we're not critiquing you. Don't take it personal. We're trying to make you better.
Yeah.
Like realizing, okay, they're trying to like make it better.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, so last question. What advice would you give to the audience who maybe feels that God has called them to do something, but they're afraid to take the next steps and jump into it?
Hmm. I think the biggest thing I could encourage you to do is to really seek the Lord. Like he truly knows, kind of like we were talking about like earlier with marriage, like that rule applies to everything that his timing is perfect. If I had quit my job 2 years before, it would have probably not worked out very well. I don't think I had the grace, the maturity, like the tools that I needed to be able to do it well. And so really seeking him and asking him to pour into that gift, to pour into and inspire you in what he's called you to do, to bring it to the surface, to train you in it. Because at the end of the day, too, like without him, like he needs to still mold our gift because it really is just clay. You know what I mean? So surrendering it to him and allowing him to mold it and to bring it forth, I think is like the biggest thing you could ever do is that surrender. He's taught me that in so many different areas, in so many different ways and seasons. And he's always made something better than I could have ever asked for in surrender. Like anytime I've surrendered something to him, it's become better for it. And so I feel like people like to look at surrender as like this, like, oh, that's a scary word. Like, I'm not in control of anything anymore. It's like, no, you're not. But at the end of the day, the person who knows best, who knows everything and can see the entire trajectory of your life is in charge of it. Do you trust him to hold it and to take care of it for you? So that'd be like the biggest thing of like, can you surrender your gift to the Lord? And like, truly just, if you're in that season of not just being unsure, not knowing what to do, seek him because he's going to answer. He's not going to sit in silence while you suffer. You know what I mean? Like, that's not his heart. His heart is to, give you the grace, give you the tools that you need to do what he's called you to do.
Yes, that's so good. Thank you. Thank you for that. Okay, so that was really it. Do you have any last things you want to tell the audience before we close?
This was so fun. I really appreciated all the questions. They were just like really, really good and thoughtful questions. But yeah, if you guys want to like follow me and find me, I'm most busy on Instagram. So my handle is Victoria Lynn Author. And then in my link in bio, you can find all the other things. I've got like a newsletter that's pretty special, and newsletter subscribers do get access to like more fun things. So yeah, but you can find me mostly on Instagram. That's probably where I'm like I say hey the most over there.
Yeah. Cool. Well, thank you so much for being a guest, and thank y'all for listening, and we will see y'all on the next episode.